Javiera Estrada's work is rooted in transformation. As a multidisciplinary artist working in photography, video, performance, and installation, she explores themes of identity, spirituality, femininity, and the often messy beauty of rebirth. Born in Mexico and raised in the U.S., Javiera's creative journey has always been deeply personal. Her work channels not only her cultural background, but her lived experience of grief, migration, and awakening. Whether through lush photographic compositions or immersive installations, she invites viewers into spaces that feel both intimate and transcendent. In this episode, we talk about her evolution as an artist, the role intuition plays in her creative process, and how her spiritual practice has shaped the way she approaches both life and art. Javiera's story is one of courage, experimentation, and a fierce commitment to self-expression. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame. Javiera, welcome to The Candid Frame. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here.
But it's so good to see you again. I really enjoyed meeting you in Inglewood.
Yeah, so good to see you too. Thank you. That was really fun.
Yeah, and I've been looking forward to having a more proper sit down and talk to you further, because I really like your work, and just from the little that I did learn of you, then I was just really curious about so much about what you did, and just because of the nature of a panel like that, you only have so much time with each person. But I thought I'd ask you a question, because I've seen you sort of describe your process in a variety of different ways. But one of the things that intrigued me most was when I heard you, or I read that you said that sometimes your work starts from a place of chaos. And I go, oh, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, well, so I move extremely fast to the point where I work backwards in this way, where it's this surge of energy. I get an idea. I've gotten better as I've gotten wiser, but I get this frenetic, obsessive energy of I must make this, and I must go down a deep rabbit hole with it, and I must make, in my mind, I want a lot of it. It's always, I'm constantly trying to pare myself down and be like, you don't need to make 1 million images. But I want to, more is more. I'm a maximalist. So I'm now I'm in this place of less is more. So when I say chaos, I just go deep into whatever idea I run with it. I don't think. And I think that is important for my process, because it is from the subconscious. I'm not one of those artists that are super thoughtful about what they want to create from the super intellectual space. Mm-hmm. I find for myself that is a hindrance. My mind is a hindrance because I'm already an overanalyzer. I think a lot. And so for me, trying to get out of my mind is kind of the goal. And I find that I produce better work that way because I get out of my own way.
Does it start from the idea of a singular image? Is it a bunch of images that come into your head? Tell me about how you sort of make enough order out of that chaos from which all the stuff is starting into, a relatively clear pathway to actually creating the work.
So, for example, one of my most recent works that I'm working on is, it starts sometimes with a single image. It'll be I imagine, a body painted woman with the backdrop painted the same and a mannequin. So it'll start like that. And that will take me a while to make. And then from there, I start imagining okay, I want to body paint a woman this way. Oh, I want to make these props. So it's just kind of it can evolve like that. It can evolve from one image. And that one image will then inform the rest of the work that I want to make. And sometimes, I have bodies of work that have never seen the light of day. I'll spend years on them. And then I'm like, what is this? You know, and sometimes you just have to get that out because it's kind of an obsession for me. I need to be creative, and sometimes it's not good because I just need to get it out there, and you got to make bad work sometimes, you know? You got to get the bad work out.
I know that all too well.
Yeah. So I've made a lot of bad work. And so it's like sifting through the rubble and figuring out what's worth keeping and what's what you should toss out. And, you know, and sometimes my process is very whole in the sense of I imagine, like, I have this idea right now that I want to do a series in the desert, specifically Joshua Tree with these rocks. And I keep seeing nudes and fabrics, and it's kind of percolating in my brain. And I always work in bodies of work. Like, I don't usually want to do one single image. I usually want to explore that to the depth and do as much as I can. And then I will pare and edit down. I just follow my inspiration until it runs dry. I'll just keep going with it, you know? So I go through phases. My friends who know me really well laugh because I kind of, you know, enroll them into helping me sometimes with projects. So they'll be, you know, I teach them how to make pom-poms so I can make my pom-pom creature. And so they're like, oh, you're in your pom-pom phase where everything is pom-poms, or you're in your, you know, ice dye and everything phase. So I go through phases of getting really obsessive about a certain either medium or textile or, you know, theme.
So that's where the hyper-focus from the ADHD helps.
Yes, super hyper-focus. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you take advantage of that particular superpower to be able to sort of do that. Because, you know, because you're probably awash with ideas, right? And you can overthink them to death. But if you have that sort of hyper-focus, obsessive thing that sort of kicks things off, it allows you to see it, at least some of them, to completion, rather than allowing them to sort of die on the vine.
Yeah, I do have to complete things. It's hard for me to cut things off, to just let it go. You know, that's actually something I'm learning to do because not everything should be done to completion. I think for my process, because not that I don't believe there's ever a waste of time. Like I don't believe in a waste of time. Whether I do something and nothing comes of it, it informs something else. Or I've learned something new, or, you know, I believe that everything you do is part of your process. And sometimes I do kick myself feeling like I'm wasting time if I go down, you know, a trajectory that I then want to pivot halfway, but that part of my brain that will complete it, you know? And then so I struggle with that. It's, you know, it's one of my struggles.
When did you start sort of learning about the idea of going past the individual photograph that you make into producing a collection of work?
I think I've always worked that way, honestly. It's never dawned on me to just do one. Sometimes I do. I mean, obviously, like, there's times where I'll do a shoot and I'll think, oh, this is gonna be a whole series. And then I do that shoot and then I realize that I don't want to do a whole series. So I do have a lot of single images like that. But I've pretty much consistently done series since I was in photography school. My brain just works that way.
You know, the reason I asked that is that, you know, because so much of your work is project based, and like for me, I've always, for the most part, have been just into singular photographs. I worked on bodies of work when I'm doing more documentary work because there it makes just more sense, right? But, you know, in sort of the fields that you're working in, you're dealing with, you know, ideas that are born out of a feeling or sort of a visual motif. And there's no, you know, beginning, middle, and end to that, right? And so when you start making the work, it sort of reveals itself as it's going. And then, as you said, sometimes it it becomes really clear, and then other times it doesn't. Are you working on like multiple ideas simultaneously?
Yes, usually so many. I'm trying to change my ways because sometimes it's too much. But yeah, in my mind, just working on two things is like the minimum. Like that is so pared down for me because I have so many ideas. It's it's hard to keep up. Like I want to complete things so I can move on to the next because I don't want it to lose its steam. But I think that if it's interesting enough, it'll stay, right? So then it'll be worth doing. And maybe something else, but in the meantime, sometimes something else comes up in between, one series and a future one that I'm waiting on. Like right now, the body of work I'm doing, I'm forcing myself to just focus on this one body of work to complete it. And then I can move on to the one that I was working on like last year. But it's hard for me because I'm excited and I want to do it, but I'm trying to have some restraint.
Like, one of the ones, one of the projects you worked on the desert, it wasn't Joshua Tree, it was elsewhere. But I think you spent about a week producing the images there. So, and you're involving other people in the project. So at some point, it has to you have to have some idea of what these images are going to be. I mean, it may start from sort of a nebulous idea, but once you start involving other people, it's not just you. You have to have sort of an idea of what the hell you're going to be doing. So that your friends don't get mad at you and say they're never going to do this again. So do you sketch things down? How are you sort of like, shaping these images into what they're going to be so that when you're out there with your camera, the intentionality about what each image sort of needs to be is kind of clear in your mind?
Yeah, sometimes I make sketches and or mood boards, right? So if I don't, now with AI, which is wonderful, I can mock up some ideas. It never really gets it right, but it can give kind of a vibe or an energy of what I'm looking for. I did that with this last shoot I did, which I call it my creature shoot. I made these creatures out of yarn and pom-poms, and I'm making another one right now because I'm insane. Out of these balloons I've been holding on to for like 10 years on the side of the road, these massive balloons. So, but most of the time, honestly, they're just in my head. They're mostly just in my brain. And then I do explain it. I mean, like I said, most of my models are friends or people that I know. They're not random people. And they love being part of the process. And, they're real troopers. They'll lay for 6 hours and let me body paint them and then shoot. They're muses. They love being part of the creative process just as much as I love creating it. So that's really special. And I'm lucky that I have really patient, wonderful muses as friends.
When you're on the location, be it the beach or the desert or inside somebody's home, and you're making these collaborative images, how much is the environment itself feeding you in terms of leading you to the images that you're going to make?
The environment is definitely, when I'm out on location, a huge part of my... Are you hearing this? Or is it just me?
I'm hearing some background noise, but...
Oh, but you're not hearing this crackle? Okay, cool. As long as you're not hearing it. So for me, when I'm doing location-based work, for example, my Salt and Sea series is all shot in Malibu on Matador Beach. It's literally all about the environment because the environment will dictate what I create. Like sometimes, I've shot there so many times and each time is completely different. The weather will be different. The tide will be different. Sometimes there's seaweed. Sometimes there's driftwood. So I'm I kind of walk around and look at the elements and see what's inspiring to me, or I'll look at a rock that I've shot before. I'm like, I haven't shot it from this angle. And then in regards to like when I did that series in the desert, it was all about the environment, but there was no bodies in it. It was just landscapes. So I just kind of drove around and would stop and would take a look and see if that was what I was looking for. And that's how I did that series.
I think some people who would hear you talk about entering, your whole creative process from this area of chaos where everything is not spelled out, right? It's very frightening and intimidating.
Is it?
I would think, because there's some people who really, like, for example, writers, I know writers who have to have an outline, right? Me, I'm a writer who likes writing by the seat of his pants. I can't outline. I don't want to outline. I want to be surprised as I'm writing something. And I'm very much the same way as a photographer. Even if I'm doing like an environmental portrait, oftentimes I go in kind of cold, and I like the fact that I don't know exactly what the setting or the scene is going to be, or what the rapport is going to be, and I get to discover it as I'm doing it. I thrive in that, but I know that a lot of people, other people, it terrifies them because they want to have an idea of what exactly they're going into. But that being said, when you're first starting, trusting that takes a while, right? It doesn't come automatically. It's not an instinctual, natural thing to do, to really kind of trust that kind of creative process. What did it take for you to get comfortable with approaching the work in that way?
It's such an interesting question. No one's ever asked me that. It's wild because as I'm hearing you talk, I realize that you really do take for granted what comes so organically to oneself, right? Like I never, you don't think about the things that come easy to you, and that maybe someone else struggles with that. And for me, I mean, I honestly can say that it's never. I have other problems in life, as we all do, but creativity is not one of them. Like I have rarely been blocked. It's a consistent flow. I wish there was more of me to keep up with myself. And I never really thought about getting comfortable in trusting my creative process. I just do. I just trust my creative. I just trust. And I have this innate tenacity to create my things in my brain. Like I've been this way since I was, little. I had a lot of creative ideas as a child that got me into a lot of trouble, my poor mother, really. Yeah. So
you care to give me an example of one of those?
Oh my gosh. I have a lot of them, but I'll give you a few. One of them is I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I discovered the sound of breaking glass. And I thought it was so beautiful. In my mind, I just loved the sound. And so one day my mom comes home and I'm outside on a ladder smashing plates because I want to get this. I know.
Man. Well, you didn't go into foster care, so.
I flooded my whole house on one of those ideas because when we were in Mexico, there's this shower, and it the floor just kind of is all even with the whole. There's no stepping into something. It's all kind of concrete on one floor, and so I really wanted to make an indoor pool. So I told my little brother, I was like, I have a genius idea. It's always a genius idea. Let's get the floaty, the inflatable pool, and fill it up in the shower. And so I'm we're in there for hours, and I'm like, why isn't it filling up? It's just totally flood the entire place.
I didn't do anything as destructive as that, though. In retrospect, it was very, very silly. For some reason, I wanted to fly, and I guess I had seen something about ballooning, and so I got a bunch of balloons, and there was a milk crate or something, and I got some string. And tied all these balloons to the string and blew into the balloons. And so it was waiting to take off. But I didn't know any concept about helium, about, certain substances being lighter than air that would lift you up. And I'm sitting there. And the thought about, well, how do I get down, popped into my head. But I said, no, I'll just figure that out later. Right. And then my mom and my cousin come home and they see me. They say, what are you doing? And I tell them, and they go, and my cousin says, you idiot, you need helium. I was like, and I just remember feeling incredibly disappointed.
Yeah.
Because I was just ready for an adventure. And and like much of my thinking, even my adult life, I'll get it started and I'll figure it out later.
Yeah. That's funny.
Thank goodness I didn't. I ended up taking flight. My poor mother.
Oh my God. I mean, I've thought of this exact thing, and I thought, how many balloons would you need to fly with helium? Quite a lot.
As you said, you grew up in Mexico. You were born in Mexico, grew up there for a time. That seems to have informed, your work, or in some ways.
Yeah.
How so?
I think it was, again, subconsciously, because I don't have a lot of memories because I was 7 when I moved, but those are very formidable years. And I grew up with a lot of color, and I just remember the flowers and tropical flowers and, Day of the Dead, and going and visiting everyone's altars and mysticism. And, yeah. So for me, I feel very connected to that part of myself. And I do feel that it's influenced me, especially when I go back and I just see all of the life and the color and passion and again, the mysticism. And I was like, oh, well, it makes total sense. And all the, and their fascination with spirit world and, skeletons. And I love bones and skeletons and all these things and collect weird things. So, yeah.
What was that transition like for you, moving from Mexico to the States at that age?
Well, it's very traumatic for a multitude of reasons. It's kind of a long story, but to make a really long story short, my mother left. They were divorced by then, and my mother's American, and she left in the middle of the night when my father was gone. And so I guess you could say she kidnapped us. And I didn't meet my father until I was 19. Oh. So from 7 to 19. So it was pretty traumatic in the sense that we left in the middle of the night. We moved to Connecticut, which was, a massive culture shock. Our English at the time wasn't as good as our Spanish, so we got made fun of. So then we refused to speak it, and then we lost it, and I relearned it. My brother never relearned it, and I, didn't see my father. So yeah, it was a big. In hindsight, I don't think I felt traumatized, but now looking back, I was like, that must have been pretty traumatic. Or go from one country to another, one language to another, father, no father,
yeah, especially at that age, at 7 years old, because that's, you get thrown into school, and then there begins that journey of wanting to be part of, right? And to be accepted by your peers. Mm-hmm. And if, you're coming as an immigrant, you don't speak the language, the ability to be able to do that becomes all the more difficult and made all the more complicated that you're in Connecticut.
Yes, waspy as it gets. So, yeah.
Well, your work, is very rich, and it's sort of tied to, your ethnic history. When did you find that in some ways, that as you got older, that you were on a journey to sort of reclaim that at some point, rather than following the path of of assimilation?
I'm not sure if I was consciously doing that. I feel, for me, creating work is psychological as well. It's informing where I'm at in my life. And so I think that, I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but I think that I'm learning who I am through my work, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes it surprises me because I'm, again, hyper-focused. So I'm not really seeing the whole picture, right? I don't see the whole picture when I start working. In fact, I see laser focused one image or a handful of images that turns into a series. But, once midway through the work, it's usually about midway. It's about halfway through the work that I'm like, okay. And then I zoom out and then I look at it and I'm always amazed that it's a perfect reflection of where I'm at in my life.
AltadenaPhotographers.org is a hometown effort to support photographers impacted by the recent fires here in Southern California. Many of these photographers lost not only their archives, but the very tools they use to make a living. This nonprofit was created by photographers for photographers. And through this registry, those in need can share what they've lost, and donors, whether individuals or companies, can help replace essential gear. Both monetary and equipment donations are welcomed and deeply appreciated. To find out how you can help, visit AltadenaPhotographers.org. I think that work, especially really good work, is really tied to some sense of self. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely conscious of what that is, that you have a mastery of who you are, and that somehow you're just successfully sort of translating that almost verbatim into a piece of work, be it a painting, a photograph, or a piece of literature. You know, there's a mystery to creativity that's sort of tied to the idea that, you know, you don't know yourself completely, you know, because you're awash with, you know, ideas of who we are, who we should be, you know, both good, bad, and indifferent, but that somehow the act of creativity serves as a sort of filter. Because one of the things that I found that's true about any work that sort of moves me is that there's a genuineness that exists there, you know, a sense of, maybe not genuineness, may not be the right word, but there's something about the work that probably, because it's imperfect, because it's flawed, because it's, you know, it's even sometimes completely indecipherable to me, that yet somehow it does something to me when I see it or when I read it. And I think that that's something that has to come from that deep innate place. And why so much work, often as well crafted as it may be, just leaves me hollow. And the journey to be able to trust, I'll speak for myself, to trust that process, even though oftentimes I don't know what the hell that I'm doing. And the only thing I'm certain of is that in the moment it feels right.
That's right.
Right? And that's it. And I think when I'm looking at other people's work that are moving me, that somehow I'm recognizing that in the work when I see it. I may not completely understand it, right? I could not verbalize and put words to why is this an effective piece, but that inherent thing that I'm pursuing in my own work, I can recognize it in somebody else's, even if they're practicing a completely different medium. But you know, everyone's journey to getting there is really, really different. And when I look at your work and I see how diverse it is, you know, I couldn't say, okay, Javiera is a black and white photographer, or she does news, or she just, you know, I look at your website and I see all the different ways you're sort of exploring yourself and you're revealing it in your work. It fascinates me that you're able to do that in so many sort of different ways. And then you're not just locked into just one singular approach or one singular subject matter to make that happen.
Oh, thank you. And I would die if I had to be locked into one, you know, I'm just not built like that. And I know, you know, I'm still slightly programmed to this like old paradigm of gallery system where I do question myself and like, oh, should I niche myself into the one thing? And, you know, I've asked myself these questions because I know the unspoken rules, right? If I want to be a certain kind of artist, and I'm too rebellious to follow those rules because I just don't like rules. And I also think, should I be following these rules? You know, so that's a conversation that I have a lot in my mind. And still, like, even today, you know, I'm like, should I be doing this other website or I'm doing this with this kind of work? Like, will they like that? And at the end of the day, I'm kind of getting to this place where I just don't care. I'm like, what's the point of being an artist? You know what I mean? I mean, that's like that's the whole point. It's like if I'm inhibiting myself, that's a problem. And I know that, I mean, look, Picasso did, not that I'm not likening myself to him, but just one example is he did so many different things, right? And that people don't know him for. He did cyanotypes and he did film. You know, he did so many different mediums, and we know him for like the certain kind of painted look, but he explored lots of different mediums as well. And so did many other artists. They're just not maybe known for it, or people don't know about it. But I think it's important that we explore what inspires us. Because if we don't, I think that's a creative killer, right? And people get boxed into a certain thing too. There is something to be said about following one path deeply and following it forever. Like, some people are really good at that. And you can tell, oh, that is this person's work. And it's very easy to spot, right? And I knew before I started that I could never be that person. And I also knew that it was going to be a much longer road for me in regards to my career. Because for me, I realized that I had to produce a lot of work and a lot of different work, so you could see the through line of all the work, right, that ties it together.
Yeah.
And I'm at that place now but I knew 15 years ago, I had that thought like, oh, it's going to take me a long time to get to that place. And it's going to be a longer road than another artist that has just stuck to one thing. But I'm okay with that.
That's good. Because I think a lot of people would want to rush it, right? Because they do want to be exhibited in a gallery, especially in the fine art world. They do want representation. They do want to start making money from their work. And there's like a hard defined pathway by which to do that. You know, keep producing the work that's already selling, right? And so on and so forth, right? Which is not to badmouth people that choose to do that. But like you said, your path, it's a harder road. It takes longer. And you likely have to keep your day job for a lot longer than you probably would want to get to that point.
Well, I really like to suffer. So, I've just gotten to this place where I've realized that it's just going to be a roller coaster. That is just my life. And what I mean by that is, you're just I have a lot of deaths and a lot of rebirths, and that's just my makeup. That's my literal genetic makeup. I always have this fantasy of being, not that person. And I've just realized that is who I am. And I've gotten much better at riding these waves, right? Of riding the waves of like, oh my gosh, it's over. Like, no one's going to buy anything ever again. And I'm just going to be homeless. And then all of a sudden it's like, someone just bought, a bunch of art. So it's like, I'm just like, well, that's my life. I don't live a conventional life. And I'd rather have that and have complete freedom. Freedom is really important to me. Freedom and independence is really important to me. And I wish that money was a motivator for me, but it's not. It just isn't. Like, I can't do something that doesn't feel good to me or doesn't inspire me, Somebody just asked me to shoot something, and I was like, it was money, but it really would have hurt my soul. So I was like, of course I could always use the money, but I was like, I can't. I don't know if that's great, but I've kind of always been this way. I can't work for anybody else, I have to work for myself.
I've done enough soul destroying jobs to know that the benefit of the paycheck does not outweigh the feeling afterwards. This feeling of being unclean.
That's really an exaggeration.
That's a bit of an exaggeration. But what it is that, at least for me, and I'm curious for you, when someone hires me to do particular work, even if they kind of know, what I do and how I do it, that somehow oftentimes it's my own fault, because I will work differently than I normally do in order to meet whatever needs they may have for the work, right? And I give them the results that they want and they have sort of anticipated, but it demands of me to work and to see and to interact in a way that is kind of not as fluid as when I'm just going out and creating for myself. And that oftentimes leaves me feeling very dissatisfied. It makes me feel like I was being dishonest, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
You know? And so it just doesn't ever feel right, even though I like the check. You know, I don't enjoy the check as much as when someone gives me money for something that I really enjoyed doing. So when, what you're saying in terms of that the money not being the determining factor, money is a consideration because it pays for all the things that we use in order to create the work. But
we need money.
Yeah, but at some point you have to, there comes a time for any artist's life to be able to learn the times where it's really important for you to say no.
Yes.
And without that, then it's going to be hard to sustain this as a life.
Yeah, that's right.
Was there an important no in your early career where you just felt like, no, I got to say no to this, and you just knew that it would not have been right for you, but it was still a bit of an effort to come up with that choice?
Yeah, I had an interaction with a gallery once where this guy said to me, I showed him my work. He's like interested in my work, and he's like, we should show your work. I said, great. And then he calls me up and he says, my cousin or sister-in-law or somebody related to him really loves this piece, right? He's like, they really love this piece. So I don't want to I'm not going to make any money from it. So you will, he didn't even ask me. He just told me. And by the way, we haven't worked together yet, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, you're going to give it to her for the, the 50%, basically because that's what a gallery takes. And I just was so taken aback because I said, well, it doesn't really work that way because it's the value of the work, right? It's not, I understand that you're not getting your 50% cut. Honestly, if it would have been anybody else and if they had come to me in a completely different way, mm-hmm. I would have maybe had a different response, but he was so aggressive and so pompous and just assumed that that's what I was going to do and told me, which I can't stand that. And so and I was right to not work with him because he got furious. I mean, he got so angry with me. He called me stupid. He said some really not so nice things and hung up on me. I was like, I am so glad I said no because I don't care about the gallery. I don't care that it's a well-known gallery. I do not want to work with someone like that. Period. This was just the beginning. I can't even imagine what would have been like if I was,
Yeah.
So no.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, because that's it's a harder lesson oftentimes, but that word, that 2-letter word, can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and I think people take advantage that artists are hungry. So it's I'll just say and I don't know where I was at that point in my life. I'm sure whether I was hungry or fed is what I'll say. I know myself, and if someone disrespects me, I don't care how hungry I am, I'd rather starve than subject myself to that kind of behavior and treatment.
You work primarily with film, and digital is abundant. And a lot of people work in digital. There are a lot of people who are gravitate to using the old-fashioned way of making pictures. Beyond the aesthetics of how it looks, what is it about the process itself that you feel you thrive on?
Well, I love square format because I use a Hasselblad. So that's number one. The other thing is that I love that it's a surprise. Because even though in my mind, I know what I shot, but sometimes it doesn't look like that, right? It looks totally different. So I like the element of surprise. And I specifically like the element when things go wrong. right? So when it's like, oh, my frame didn't work, now it's a double exposure. How did, that's kind of cool. Like where I wasn't purposely trying to do that, or there's a light leak in because my back dropped and I didn't see that there's like a light leak in there. So I like when it gets messy. And the other thing, which I think is actually the most important thing for me, is because I move so fast, it slows me down. It forces me to slow down and be really, really intentional with what I'm shooting, because I don't shoot a lot. Like when I do a shoot with film, I think the max I'll shoot is 4 rolls of 12 images, So I don't like to overshoot when I shoot film. I like to be very, very intentional with each shot. So it makes me think, and that's where I do a lot of sketching.
That is a definite advantage, because God knows I hate going through thousands of images.
Me too. I hate editing.
God. Yeah.
Worse.
It's, I work with a digital medium format, but like you, I'm working really slowly because those are 104 megapixel files. And the idea of going through hundreds of those of a shoot, no, thank you. So I find even when I'm shooting with my APS-C with my Fuji camera, I'm shooting less and less and less and less. Not because I've become this incredible photographer. It's just I hate having to go through and sorting through all those pictures. And it's onerous. And, it takes up a lot of space.
A lot of space.
A lot of space they have to go through.
I just had a nightmare editing where I did a job. I don't usually shoot commercial, but I just did this job, and I think I shot like 6,000 images.
Oh my God.
And I had to edit. It was a 4-day shoot, and I had to edit, and I was going insane. I was like, what? This is crazy. Yeah. It was a lot.
Why 6,000? Just a runaway horse?
No, it was an event, and I don't even do events.
Okay.
It was like this crazy. Yeah, it was an event. I don't know. I mean, I literally haven't done I don't know if I've actually even ever shot an event in my life. So it just happened to be a really magical one where I couldn't say no. So I was like, okay.
One of the things about the people that you photograph, especially the nude work, is that those aren't models. Those are people that either are your friends or people who you've just come to know and who have agreed to pose in front of your lens. But why is that important that you not work with someone who is accustomed to being in front of the lens?
Because they have these preconceived moves. Their models know how to move their bodies, right? But they also have a formula in how they move. So I don't like that formula. And not to say that models can't break away from that formula. I mean, I've also never shot, right, like a supermodel, right, where they are real muses. And I'm sure, like, if I was shooting Kate Moss or like Christy Turlington or something like that it probably wouldn't be hard. But the models that I have shot are, models that are used to moving in a certain way to show off the clothes and to, they have this kind of like editorial thing, and I don't like that. I like it to be more organic. It feels too posed. That's why I don't like using models.
But there's a self-consciousness that comes from someone who's not used to be in front of the lens, much less unclothed, right? So in terms of getting them to the point where they are comfortable, where they're relaxed, because I haven't done nudes, but even when I'm photographing someone who isn't used to being in front of the camera, there is a certain tension that exists somewhere in their body, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm always sort of looking for is that moment where that tension goes. And it's oftentimes very brief. Sometimes it's at the tail end where I say, we're done. And then the card done and I keep shooting, right? But that's what I'm looking for, and it's incredibly subtle. But, when you're working with someone, how do you sort of massage the interaction between the two of you so that you can elicit something that comes off as genuine, natural, real?
Well, the women that I choose tend to be very comfortable in their bodies, most of them, I would say. And they are they tend to be extroverts, right? And be completely comfortable. However, once in a while, I will get someone who I haven't worked with, who's new, who I find really aesthetically beautiful, but when I get them in front of the camera, they don't know what to do, right? I have had that experience. And it's tough because what I tend to do with those women is kind of just get them to dance around and just loosen up their bodies. And also I will pose in front of them to show them what I want. So then they don't have to kind of like, because they're like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do. So if they can't take the direction, I will literally do that pose. I'll switch places with them. I'll get into the position. I'm like, okay, this is what I want you to do. And then they'll do that. Or I'll be behind the camera and doing the poses that I want and they'll mirror me. So that helps because then it gives them something to do. But I do find that if someone's not comfortable, I don't usually shoot with them again because you can see it. Like you said, it's like you can see it, you can feel it, and I can only do so much, right? Because there's some people that maybe they've never shot nude and they're a little timid, but by the end they're like, we're done. They loved it. And then there's some people that have a lot of trauma in their bodies. And I mean, it's like you can see it's a weight on them. And so what I do if I see that their face is holding a lot of this, I tend to then not show their face and just make it all about their body and be more sculptural. Because to have the face be stiff is, not good. But I don't usually have this problem because I'm pretty good now. I'm pretty intuitive. And when I meet someone, I can kind of tell how they're going to be in front of the camera. Like I knew this one girl that I'm thinking of specifically in my mind. I was like, she's probably going to be stiff, but I'm okay with that because I want her to look sculptural. So then I choose different women for different projects depending on what their strengths are and how they move.
And just from the short time I've known you, you sort of give off this energy and this enthusiasm and an openness that I think is really conducive to that kind of work, And so I think that's really important. And that's something that can't be taught. You're either that way or not. Right?
That's true. Yeah, it's true. And I mean, I have an advantage. I'm a woman. So it's, a woman shooting women is going to be a lot easier than a man shooting. There's always that tension. It's just, it's a different eye. It's a very different gaze, right? And you're right. I do come from a background of healing work as well, and I think that really serves me. I'm a very non-judgmental person and very compassionate for people and for their pain and what they've gone through. So a lot of times the sessions, people cry, or they'll say, I don't know why I'm telling. I'm like, it's okay. Like this is part of the process. And in doing so, it's actually motivated me to work with this nonprofit of people that have gone through abuse, right? Through like physical abuse and have had real deep trauma, and do a photo shoot with them so that it helps heal them, right? Because they have, there's a lot of triggers and traumas in their body, and to be able to transmute that trauma into something beautiful, like a piece of art. And I think that is actually inherently like what ties all my work together, right? Like for me is transmuting, whether it's darkness or pain or a challenge, into something light or beautiful. And that's what wisdom is, right? It's like experience embodied.
Yeah, because trauma inevitably causes a distorted sense of self. And then
that's right.
And then when someone like you comes and photographs them, you reveal them in a way that they are, for whatever reason, unable to see themselves as, including being beautiful, including being worthy of attention, good attention, rather than negative attention. And it can be a moment of of great empowerment, but it can also be a beautiful moment where they can be vulnerable and feel safe at the same time, which I think, which is something that any photographer who asks anybody to pose for them, even if it's a street shot, I think is important to be sensitive to, because you don't know, right? But you have to come to that. You have to come to that moment with that attitude, rather than just I want to take this, right? Because people of trauma have had enough taken from them.
That's right. I mean, I feel like, just to reflect back to you, that your energy is very grounded and calm and also open, and it feels very safe. So I can imagine that when you're shooting people, that they feel that energy too, right? Yeah, you have very lovely energy, and that's really important for working with people. I mean, you need that, for people to feel safe, because otherwise you're not going to get that vulnerability.
Right, because like you've done a lot of self-work, that's the result of all of that, right? Because me 30 years ago was a hot mess, right?
Yeah, same.
So, things have gotten a lot better as a result. And that manifests in how I am on the show. It manifests itself, when I'm photographing someone or doing whatever, right? Because there's an acceptance of self. As perfect and as flawed as I continue to be, right? There's an acceptance that makes it easy to create that space for somebody else, whether it's in an interview for a podcast or making a photograph or just sitting down and just talking with someone. And, it's a beautiful space to be. And then this medium that we choose provides us the ability to be able to practice it on a regular level with sometimes complete strangers. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's a gift. It's a real gift. And it's a privilege, I mean, photography has opened up so many doors that I would not have walked through, had I not had a camera in my hand. So I think it's an honor and a privilege to be able to capture people's essence and beauty and help support them seeing themselves. I mean, that's honestly like really the intention of anything that I do, because I'm kind of bored with the idea of making art just for art's sake. Mm-hmm. Like, I always have to have purpose in the work. And for me, it's about giving back, giving back to people in some way. I'm always asking that question, like, how is this serving others? Like, how is this image serving others? Oh, maybe it'll inspire them to, and just as simple as be in their own creativity and be free to explore multitude of mediums and paths. So I think when you accept yourself, that's really the key to unlocking your maximum potential.
We've talked a lot about, the creation of the work, but the finished product, especially in your case, is often these physical manifestations of that work, like a print or a multimedia thing, collage. And talk to me about that part of it, of manifesting, what started off as an idea within your imagination into this physical thing. Oftentimes when I'm thinking about photographs and printing them, I'm thinking about a technical level, right? In terms of what my printer can do and making all this sort of adjustments. And I'm hoping that whatever I did when I made the images sort of translates that to the print, right? But for you, especially since you're working with a variety of different mediums, I suspect that there's more than just aesthetic considerations of how black is that black and how does it accurately reflect color. What are the things that you're thinking of or considering when you're making that physical object of your work?
I would agree with what you said, which is that you want the intent, you want for your image that you created to translate onto the print, right? You want it to be that. I work with really talented printers. I am a terrible printer. I sometimes don't see contrast, ironically. And annoyingly, I will go back and like tinker with an image. If it hasn't been like printed, right? I'll do this like, every every like 3 years, like, or 4 years, I'll go and I'll be like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? This image is so flat. And then I'll, go and do that. I'm getting better at it though. And my color pieces are fine. Like I never need to mess with those. It's the black and white for some reason that I have trouble seeing the contrast. But I just really trust my printers. And, my color printer, he's amazing. He gives me samples of, I'll say, I'm thinking about these papers, and he'll, do all the samples and we'll look at them. And usually what I like is a little bit more conservative than what he likes, because he's more contrasty and he likes more punch and I'm more subtle. So it's kind of, and then I find that like sometimes I'm too subtle and he's too punchy. And so we meet, like, I'm like, okay, so I'm somewhere in the middle, I think is good. So I'm just looking for a feeling, really. It's like, oh, that's the feeling that I want. It's just like an intuition thing.
That is so interesting, because some of the color work, it is punchy, right?
It is.
It already as is. So the fact that you're like sort of reining it in is a surprise.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty, the color, color I can go crazy to, like, I always go to an extreme and I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring it back. And then I'm like, is that too colorful? I was like, no, it's never too colorful.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore on their own. And it can be anyone. Someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
Ooh, that's tough. There's so many of them. Okay, let me think. Going through the list of all the people that I'm really into. I think I've mentioned her before. Zanele Muholi, South African photographer. I think she's a they, but I'll just say she because I'm not sure. But she does also portraits, and it kind of reminds me of like my Salt and Sea work. It's very contrasty, black and white, and it's all about the subject. So it's all about her and the props that she has around her. It's very striking. Like the work is very striking, and she has an incredible face. Like it's full of, you can just see the stories and the depth there. And that's something that when we're talking about what we're looking for with the work, it's like, I'm always looking for depth. And I think I'm looking for the same thing that I create my work with, which is like the polarity, that dark and light. Like, I don't like a work to just be fluffy. Like, I need some serious depth. And it doesn't have to necessarily be dark, but it's got to have a little edge to it. And her work has that. It's really interesting to me. I really like. And she also does sculptures now too. And she's now blown up and famous and all over the place. But I really enjoy her work and I recommend it.
Well, thank you for that recommendation. And thank you again for your time. It was a real joy to have a chance to talk with you.
Oh, it was so nice. You're so lovely. It was really, the joy was mine.
Thanks to Javiera for sharing her story and artistic vision. You can learn more about her work and upcoming projects by visiting JavieraEstrada.com and follow her on Instagram. You can also support The Candid Frame financially through Patreon. You'll find links for that in the website. And if you want to make a one-time contribution, you can do that through buymeacoffee.com/The Candid Frame. We've also relaunched our newsletter on Substack. Subscribe today for regular updates, behind-the-scenes content, and access to a thriving community I'm proud to be a part of. And if you ever can't find a specific episode on your podcast app, remember, you can always download the Candid Frame app for both iOS and Android. And thanks to your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.